waging information warfare against pushers of fake news. It's David Knight.
Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we talked yesterday. We showed you some pictures of the campaign ad in the Virginia gubernatorial race. It was a campaign ad that showed a redneck with a pickup truck and a Confederate flag, and he had a "Don't Tread on Me" bumper sticker, and he's running down dreamers and young Muslims in Virginia. That was an ad that was run by the Democrat candidate. There you can see the ad there. It was an outrageous ad. The RNC chairwoman, McDaniel, says every Democrat should denounce the Latino Victory Fund ad. It was Latino group that was doing it. Perhaps they've got some ties to La Raza. I didn't look to see whether they did. But it was a very racist ad targeting white people. And, of course, what it did was it took the reality of what we just saw with the hateful Islamic attack in New York City. It turned that on its head, because that's what the Democrats do in their identity politics, always turning reality on its head. RNC chairwoman Romney McDaniel said that every Democrat should denounce this sickening ad. She said this ad is one of the most sickening things that was put out there, by the way, fronted by Eva Longoria, the Latino Victory ad. Do we have that ad here? The fact of the matter is that she's fronting the ad. It's despicable, showing people trying to run down young, apparently Hispanic individuals running from these folks. And, of course, one of them has a hijab on, so obviously Muslim. So that's the way they were running this, trying to portray the Republican candidate as a racist who was trying to kill minority children, dreamer children. Now, what's interesting is the reaction of the Democrat governor and the reaction of the Democrat faithful, because the Democrat governor came out. Oh, by the way, I should say that that ad resulted in a tripling of contributions to the Republican candidate. It outraged people, but it also outraged Democrats as to what the Democrat candidate did. He flip-flopped on his support for sanctuary cities. He had, in the past, voted to prevent a bill that would ban sanctuary cities from going to the governor's desk. He called it a political game. He called it promoting fear-mongering. You know, kind of like that ad that he had that we just showed you there. And so he came out and said that under certain circumstances, he would now sign legislation that would ban sanctuary cities. So in the past, he shut down the attempt to have sanctuary cities banned in Virginia. Now he says, no, I would do that. Under certain circumstances, I would sign legislation. Well, you know he's not. You know he's not going to do it. But he's out there saying, yeah, I would ban sanctuary cities in Virginia maybe, and maybe crack down on MS-13 gangs. Just elect me, and we can talk about that later, says the Democrat. Well, the Democrats are furious about this. Democracy for America denounced him. They said yesterday that he had flip-flopped. He was saying, I'm not flip-flopping. No, I'm not flip-flopping at all. He will flip-flop if he gets elected, because he put that caveat in there. Under certain circumstances, I will stop sanctuary cities. So this is what Democracy for America, a Democrat organization, said about him. They said, Ralph Northam's gutless, politically senseless, morally debased decision yesterday, you get the idea they don't like it, to openly backtrack on his commitment to standing up for immigrant families. And then they started criticizing him because of something else he did. They have a black lieutenant governor candidate who is running a down ticket. And in certain areas where it served his interest, this Democrat candidate for governor would show the black lieutenant governor candidate on flyers. But in other areas, you know, like those areas where they've got the crazy guys in pickup trucks running down Muslim children, in those areas, he would take off the black lieutenant gubernatorial candidate, lieutenant governor candidate. Quentin James, the founder of Collective PAC, a political action committee that supports progressive black candidates, including Justin Fairfax, said the move to remove his image from the campaign smells of subtle racism. He says it reeks of it, if not a tone deafness, about how we're going to win in November. Leaving Justin Fairfax off the flyers, even if it's for a small universe of union members, sends the wrong message. No, it tells us exactly what they're about. It tells us that they're concerned. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. Roger Stone is going to be joining us in the studio in the next segment. In this segment, I'd like to talk a little bit about the tax plan that has been revealed out of the House. We've had a lot of media outlets scoring who the winners and losers are going to be. We're going to tell you a little bit about what is in this and give you an idea of some of this. But, of course, at the center of this are basically two things. Whether or not corporate taxes, which are the highest in the world here in the USA, whether or not those taxes should be reduced. And the other big issue is whether or not you're going to have state and local taxes still included on this. That is something that really hits the blue states, and as we'll explain, the high-income earners in blue states more specifically. But let's take a look at the corporate income tax first. You know, if you look at the information that the Small Business Association puts out, statistics about small businesses surviving, they point out that 2/3 of businesses survive 2 years in business. Half of them will survive for 5 years, and 1/3 will survive 10 years. So let's think about that. In other words, 1/3 of small business starts fail in the first 2 years, and another half, by 5 years, half of them are gone. And by 10 years, only 1/3 survive. So it is heavily weighted to the front. And I can tell you from the standpoint of somebody who started a small business, I was in my early 30s when we did it, and you don't really understand necessarily all the taxes. And if you get behind in your taxes, that alone can take you out. If you don't understand as a business what your costs are, if you don't understand all the regulations that are there, that's a big part of your cost. If you don't understand or know what your costs are, then you're not going to make a profit. And, of course, Hillary Clinton said when they were doing the attempted takeover healthcare, she said, I can't be concerned about every undercapitalized business. You know, because those of us who actually have to work for a living instead of spreading influence around for tens of millions of dollars in cash and illegal deals, she can't be worried about those types of people who are actually out there working. But the issue is this. If you understand what your costs are, and you have to do that if you're going to survive, then you will have to make that the basis and then build your profit on top of that. So the point that I'm making here is that taxes are always passed on to the consumer and the products that you sell. And if you're unable to do that, you're unable to make a profit, and you will go out of business. It's just that simple. Just that simple. And Hillary Clinton will have absolutely no sympathy for you, of course, because she doesn't understand how working people make their money. But the bottom line is that there is no such thing as a corporate income tax. The taxes that you put on corporations are passed through to consumers in higher prices on the products that you sell, or they show up in lower wages for the people who work for that corporation. It's just that simple. And unfortunately, we still have a tax bill whatsoever. It was mentioned at one point in time. The taxes in America on products that are made in America that people try to export from America to somewhere else, those products that we sell in other countries carry domestic taxes with them. That's not the case in products that are made in Europe. Products that are made in Europe, even though they have very, very high taxes there, they remove the taxes if the product is going to be exported. That doesn't happen with American products. So American products in the global market carry with them a disadvantage. That's been one of the key factors, folks, that has been driving the offshoring of manufacturing and other issues. It's our tax structure, and nothing is being done to address that. But let's talk about corporations, because when I look at the Hill, they come in and they say, winners and losers of the Republican tax bill. And the first thing they say, winners, corporations. But, you know, there is no corporate tax. We are reducing taxes on, we're reducing the cost of products that we sell when we reduce the corporate tax. We are increasing the wages of the employees who would otherwise have to take a pay cut, because somewhere you've got to make a profit or your business goes out of business. So, yes, corporations will get a big tax cut from going down from the highest tax rate in the world of 35% down to 20%. And of course, they're not happy about that. They don't talk about the fact that we have the highest tax rate in the world. They say major business groups will get a break on this. Super wealthy individuals, well, we'll see about that. We'll take a little bit more of a look at it. This is the Hill talking. And then they say advocates who want to repeal the Johnson Amendment. Yes, that is going to be a big part of it. And then they put down as losers blue states. And we've had Nancy Pelosi saying that this is taking out state and local taxes is going to raise taxes on the middle class. And that is absolutely a lie. Even the Washington Post pointed out in a fact check, they looked at who takes these deductions, and they found that it was heavily skewed to high incomes in high tax states. And so what's going to happen is they are going to feel the high taxes in California and New York more heavily. And maybe they will do something about it instead of having the rest of us subsidize that for them. And then the big ticket item that they're talking about here is the budget deficit. See, they were adding about $1 trillion a year to the budget deficit under Obama, but now Democrats have suddenly discovered that we have a budget deficit. Imagine that. They hadn't cared about that whatsoever for the last several years, but now they do. And it is something we should care about. But, of course, they never propose cutting any spending. No, that's never going to be on the issue. They simply want you to pay more money, and they don't want you to get any kind of a tax break. So they talk about the deficit, and they never talk about any tax cuts. Finally, and this may be something that might hurt the chances of this passing if they leave this in, homeowners, they're saying that the proposed legislation would cap the deduction for new home purchases and interest from a valuation. Right now, it's got a cap of $1 million homes. They would drop that down to $500,000. So that's something that will be difficult for them to move past. But the GOP tax bill that gets rid of the Johnson Amendment. Let's talk about that, of course. That was something that's put in by Lyndon Johnson. He was upset that some churches had opposed him in a race that he nearly lost. And so in the 1950s, he put in the Johnson Amendment, which told the IRS to remove the tax-exempt status of any church that talked about politics. And there's a lesson in this. Whether or not churches should have a deduction or not, that's a separate issue. I think the key thing here is the way that the government reins people in, gives you a little benefit, hands out cash to you, or gives you a tax deduction. And what they did was they wove their web. You know, Nancy Pelosi said, "I'm a legislator. I'm like a loomer. It's like I'm creating this thing. I'm weaving this thing." Yes, they do. They have very deceptive webs that they use, like a spider's web. And this is an important thing for everybody to understand. What they did was they told churches, you play along with us, you register as a 501c3 corporation, and we'll let you deduct, let all the people who go to your church deduct those deductions. And then they said, oh, but now we've got leverage on you. If you say anything about politics, we will pull that away from you and the people that go to your church, and we will do it retroactively. See, that was the leverage that they got with people, thanks to Lyndon Johnson. And so for that reason alone, it ought to go. Long before we had the IRS, there was a tradition of not taxing the property of churches. That is something that has been in Western civilization. So whether or not you agree with it or not, that's a different issue than the way the IRS used it to suppress political speech. Understand that in the American Revolution, they called the pastors, they called them the Black Regiment. And they were very much opposed to any reestablishment of authority in the colonies that would take away the religious freedom that many of them had moved to the United States to escape. So now they're, when we're talking about rich individuals, Rand Paul said, there's not much of a tax cut if you're not going to reduce taxes on the people at the very top. He says, yes, it's good that we're going to help people in the middle and the lower income levels, and that is there. But he says, if we're not going to do the tax cut for the people at the very top who are paying most of the taxes, it isn't going to be a tax cut at all. Reports are that the tax bill keeps the nearly 40% rate for the highest income earners, but Politico says, wait a minute, there's actually, and these are people who would say, we want to tax the rich, the GOP has a hidden 46% tax bracket. So on the wealthy people, they may be actually going up on taxes. That is something that nobody had expected to see, an unexpected outcome of this. Many people who had been briefed on this were very surprised to see it. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight, and we'll have Roger Stone in studio. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and with me in studio is Roger Stone. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to start with the suspension of President Trump's Twitter account because Roger is the guy. It was last Saturday, was it, Roger, that they permanently deleted your account? Was that
yeah, it's interesting. At first, David, they told me that I had only been suspended for 3 hours and 22 minutes. 322, the numbers of skull and bones. Very interesting. And therefore, I waited and waited and waited, and it counted down. And then when it got to 1 minute, it all went dark. All my 300,000 followers were gone. The people I was following were gone, and so on. I spoke to my lawyers last night. I am preparing a lawsuit against Twitter. They were ebullient because the turning off of the president's Twitter feed proves malice. We'll be introducing that in court. There are antitrust issues. There are First Amendment issues. The censorship of Twitter cannot continue. And what's really been heartening for me is the number of large multinational corporations who have come forward willing to underwrite my lawsuit. Others in the communication community who think Twitter is cheating, and therefore there'll be no lack of funds for this lawsuit because it will be very expensive.
Well, let's talk about a little bit of their cheating, because it came out in congressional testimony that for the hashtag DNC leaks, Hillary Clinton is selling the false idea that it was a Russian hack and so forth to try to get people to pay attention to, how was this information obtained rather than what is the information.
Yes.
And so as people were tweeting about this, and they had over 500,000 people involved in this, they were shutting down 48% of these tweets that had a hashtag DNC leaks. They were doing that algorithmically. Yeah. And then they admitted that later on with Podesta, it wasn't about half of the tweets, it was about 25% of the tweets that they shut down when Podesta's emails were taken out. So this is something they have a pattern of behavior of being activists. And I guess the question is there some kind of a federal elections violation there when they do a kind of an in-kind contribution and don't report that?
Something the lawyers are looking at. I mean, in my case, I feel like I'm being held to a different standard. In other words, people every day on Twitter threaten to kill me,
yes.
my wife,
yes.
children, worst of all, my dogs, and they're still there. They don't get banned. There's no process. In my case, I don't think I've said anything that, say, Keith Olbermann hasn't said, yet he's still there and I'm banned. So it's unequal. That's one of our arguments in court. But look, I'm looking forward to this fight. It's about time. I'm tired of the censorship on Twitter. And actions like yesterday, the president getting knocked off for 11 minutes, I guess it was, the admission that they have manipulated these tweets during the election, this all helps build our case in federal court.
I think one of the interesting things that came out of the Twitterverse yesterday as President Trump disappeared, and then they said first, well, we don't know what happened. Then they said, well, it was done inadvertently. Then they said, well, it was done deliberately by a guy on his last day out, or a woman. And then I think even more interesting than that was what the people on Twitter said. Donald Trump's Twitter was deleted. Finally, someone did the right thing. Sadly, it wasn't our government who did it. So this is the political orientation of the left towards authoritarian censorship, and Twitter is their baby. It reflects that kind of authoritarian censorship attitude.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Somebody put up something called Roger Stone GOP, not me, a parody site. They took that down. The official feed for the film Get Me Roger Stone was Stone Flick. They took that down. No, it's censorship. It's abhorrent. And we'll see you guys in court. Can't wait.
It's an interesting thing, too, because we have Matt Dubiel, who's with our Chicago affiliate, WCKG in Chicago. And he was saying, it's important for us to get, in terms of our alternative media, it's important for us to get onto all these different platforms because social media has the capability, he said this well before they did what you just described to you. He said social media has the ability to just flush everything that you did down the memory hole. So once they decide that you are a non-person, they can make you that way as far as the internet and social media is concerned. They can just flush everything. They can, if it's YouTube, they can delete all the videos that you've ever put up somewhere. They can find anywhere that you were even interviewed on another program. They can identify your voice and shut that down. They can make you disappear. And that's the thing that should be very, very concerning to all of us. And that's why it's important for us to get on all different types of media. We've got a situation that Gerald Celente said with these 3 big social media sites, with YouTube, with Twitter, with Facebook. He says it's going back to the days when we just had 3 networks, ABC, NBC, CBS.
They're trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube. Look, a special shout out to John and Ray in Chicago, 2 of my favorite radio jocks, because they immediately called and wanted me to come on and talk about the Twitter ban. Or my friend Jimmy Mathis at WBAL in Baltimore. I mean, I totally agree with you. Talk radio, the other platforms, Facebook and so on. I wrote a piece that's up on Infowars at the website now. They can just make you disappear, that you become a non-person. But really what they want to do is go back to the days when ABC, NBC, CBS, they had a monopoly on political discourse. If it didn't happen there, it didn't happen. It was like the tree falling in the forest. And now, with the advent of the internet and the fact that most people are going through the net in order to get their news, it doesn't take you very long to figure out that CNN is not news and that Infowars.com is news. They want to put the toothpaste back in the tube, either by manipulating the algorithms or using their fake news designations. But we'll never go back, David. We'll never go back. The American people have tasted press freedom, and they like it.
Yes, except for the liberals who don't like to make their arguments. And as we see these different tweets, one of these person says, well, his President Trump's Twitter account needs to be deactivated permanently, which is what they did to you. So they're calling for that. And Twitter is very upset about the rise of conservatives. And we're winning the argument, we're winning the demographics, and their only answer is to censor this. And even when it hurts their business model, and we see this with YouTube, demonetizing individuals all across the conservative spectrum, which costs YouTube money, but they don't care because they are about politics. That is their primary orientation. It is more about their power than it is about the money, because, Roger, if they got the power, the money will come.
No, I've seen this in the case of my friends Diamond and Silk, where they have where they've taken down their YouTube tweets or their YouTube postings in order to demonetize them.
Or Ron Paul.
You know, it's economic terrorism is what it is. But you're right. First of all, they have all the money in the world.
Yes.
And Google's cruising to get busted. There's no question. The bottom line on this, they're all going to end up being regulated like a public utility.
I think they should be. Yes.
And look, the phone company's a private company, but they can't deny you a telephone.
Yes.
And that's how it should be.
And I think it's interesting because we see this very, very controversial case about the bakers and the photographers being compelled in violation of what they said was their Christian conscience to do a gay wedding. And they say, no, you're in business. You can't determine who you're going to serve. And yet they give these real monopolies. I mean, these small town bakers and photographers don't have a monopoly. You could go to somebody else. But the places that have a de facto monopoly, they give them a pass and they allow this to go. That is a real strange thing that needs to be exploited and probed. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight with Roger Stone. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and Roger Stone is with us in studio. We're going to talk about what's going on with Attorney General Sessions. There is now another call to have him go before Congress again because of George Papadopoulos. The guy who reminds me more than anyone of John Lovett's The Liar character. When he goes around and says, yeah, that's me. That's the ticket. I did all that stuff when he was just a campaign volunteer, the unpaid campaign volunteer. Everybody's saying, who is this guy? I've never heard of this guy. He's like, oh, yeah, I was a foreign policy advisor. And then prior to that, he's at the Hudson Institute, and he tells everybody he's a coal and energy expert. And they go, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And they say, oh, he's an unpaid volunteer. We're going to go to Roger in just a moment. I just want to remind you of some of the sales that we have here at InfoWarsStore.com. Some of the most popular products we have, some of the biggest discounts we have ever had. 50% off of Brain Force Plus. We also have 50% off Silver Bullet, our colloidal silver, 50% off of Winter Sun, our vitamin D supplement. And as we mentioned throughout the last week or so that we've had this on sale, it is a very important supplement for this time of year because you're not going to get as much sun this time of year. That's why we call it winter sun. People have typically felt depressed, but there is actually a physiological reason for that. Not just a psychological issue of not seeing the sunlight, but a physiological aspect to that because you're not getting sunlight to help your body to produce vitamin D. But it also has a manifestation in getting sick more frequently because vitamin D is very important for your immune system. It's very important for your bones for your muscles to be able to uptake the nutrients that you get out of your food. If you're taking a calcium supplement, you need to make sure that you don't have a vitamin D deficiency, because your bones will not be able to assimilate the calcium supplements that you take if you don't have sufficient vitamin D. So that is 50% off. It's called Winter Sun, a great way to take that. And it's a liquid formula, and I love to take my supplements and vitamins in a liquid format. One of those is Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix. It is a multivitamin, a multi-mineral formula. You can take that without taking a lot of pills, and right now you can get it when you check out. Enter the code at checkout, VITA10, for 10% off of Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix. And you can find all these specials at InfoWarsStore.com. We thank you for your support. Roger, let's talk about what's going on with Jeff Sessions, because now they're saying that Carter Page said he told Sessions about a Russian trip. He saw him as he was the only time they ever met. And he said, I'm going to Russia for a lecture that I'm doing there. And so they say, oh, well, that shows that Sessions knows something about Russia. Let's have him come back on and testify. The stuff with George Papadopoulos, the guy that we were just talking about, the fact that he said, well, I was this kind of person, I was that kind of person. He was an unpaid intern at the Hudson Institute, but he put himself out there inflating his resume multiple times. And now, guess what? The FBI has him on charges of lying to the FBI when he was inflating his resume everywhere. And one of the things he was saying was that he was supposedly in contact with some guy called the Professor in Russia, a very mysterious character. Yeah. Maybe he was also in contact with Marianne and Ginger and the billionaire. Who knows?
It's very strange that this guy is in a succession of neocon think tanks, the Jamestown Institute, the Hudson Institute, and then suddenly overnight, he's pro-Russian. So he's working at all these virulent anti-Russian think tanks, a neocon, clearly a neocon, and then overnight he's in touch with the Russians. I believe he was wearing a wire for Mueller for at least 3 months. I've been through 10 presidential campaigns. It's very common to have these issue advisory panels that are strictly voluntary. They have no authority. They're mostly for a press release. And that's this guy's involvement. To try to make him a senior staffer to Donald Trump with some authority, that's a joke. But what's more concerning to me, David, about Jeff Sessions is a report this morning that he has now recused himself in regard to Uranium One. So he has recused himself on anything pertaining to Russia. He's recused himself now on Uranium One. He seems obsessed with asset forfeiture, this crazy program where they can seize all of your assets prior to your being convicted of any crime.
Not even charged.
And then his mania to crack down on legal marijuana in the 29 states where the people have decided to legalize it. I really think it's time for Jeff Sessions to go. He can't seem to do the job. And then more disturbingly, these tweets by the president who says he's been told that he can't direct the DOJ. That's incorrect. He can order Jeff Sessions, order him to appoint a special prosecutor on Uranium One. Andrew McCarthy, Congressman Ron DeSantis, Judge Andrew Napolitano. There's 3 I just nominated. Any one of those able men could get to the bottom of the DOJ Obama cover-up of Uranium One.
Well, we're talking about Uranium One. Let's talk about the conflict of interest that Robert Mueller has. To me, that is absolutely amazing. That here's a guy who, as director of FBI, and the FBI was investigating the people that, that were trying to buy this, and that was happening for 15 months before the approval went through, and then they put a gag on this guy. And that was all under FBI, under Robert Mueller when he was FBI director. So why isn't he concerned about a conflict of interest, or at least even the appearance of a conflict of interest?
Well, he's got multiple conflicts. First of all, he has a long-time, deep personal relationship with James Comey.
Oh, yeah.
And Comey is a central figure in his investigation. There's a conflict of interest. He also auditioned. He essentially interviewed for Comey's position as FBI director with the president. And he was passed over, therefore, the source of his animus towards the president. Conflict number 2. Mueller needs to step down. He's not going to do so voluntarily. However, if he became the subject of a federal investigation by a special prosecutor looking into Russia, looking into Uranium One,
yes,
he would have to step down.
Yes.
Which is, and when I said that, to the Daily Caller, within hours, Vanity Fair and a crazy left-wing site called Raw Story, which rarely gets anything right, they immediately were out there with a Stone is wrong, Stone's incorrect. No, I think I hit it right on the head. That's why they reacted so quickly.
I mean, this looks like obstruction of justice, and it was so obvious that I looked at this and was like, is he there to destroy evidence for Hillary Clinton? Because, I mean, he's at the center of all this. You got you got Eric Holder, the Attorney General. You got Hillary Clinton on that panel. You got the Treasury Secretary on that panel. And then the FBI knows that this is happening, and it should have stopped the deal. They conceal it from Congress. They conceal it from everybody else, and they put a gag order on this guy. And all of that happened while he's FBI director. He doesn't know what's going on with any of that. He doesn't have any criminal liability for obstruction of justice with any of that.
No, and it regards not only Mr. Mueller, but also Mr. Comey, also Assistant Director Andrew McCabe, and Lord knows, how about then U.S. Attorney Rod Rosenstein?
Yes.
So the big four, these guys are running the cover-up on Uranium One. It's time to bust them. No, Mr. President, you have the authority to order the Justice Department to appoint a special prosecutor in the Uranium One matter, and you should do so forthwith.
You know, one of the things that I looked at the other day, and it was an article by a lawyer. It's carried by the LA Times, and they were looking at the special prosecutor issue specifically, talking about the history of it. Said this was a law that was created in 1978. It expired, and they allowed it to expire in 1999 because they came to the realization that when you hire a special prosecutor, it is too easy to turn this into a witch hunt or a kind of Stalin-esque type of thing. Bring me the man, I'll find the crime. Said you're typically focused on the individual and not on a specific crime. And that law was challenged all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upheld it 8-1. The one lone dissenter on that was Antonin Scalia, and that's exactly what he had to say. So they let that transpire in 1999, and yet if that law were still in effect, you would have a situation where it would be a 3-panel judge would be appointing the special prosecutor. He would be filing reports with them on a regular basis. They had a method of control, but now there's no law and there's no control. It seems like Mueller is totally on his own, totally rogue. We're going to get your answer in response to that when we come back. I'm David Knight, and we're here with Roger Stone in studio. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight with Roger Stone here in studio with me. It's great to talk to him. We're going to talk to him about Mueller and the investigation, and Paul Manafort, who goes back a long ways with Roger Stone. Real quickly, I want to tell you about some of the specials that we have at InfoWarsStore.com. We still have 50% off of Brain Force Plus. Great product. If you haven't tried it, this is the time to give it a try. I would call it Brain Focus. It's my favorite supplement that we have here because it really does focus my mind. And it's now 50% off. So if you've tried it and you like it as much as I do, stock up on it. We also have 50% off of Winter Sun, our vitamin D supplement, 50% off colloidal silver. That is our silver bullet, which is our colloidal silver product. And you can also get 10% off of Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix, a great way to take your supplements, your vitamins, your minerals without swallowing a lot of pills. You can get 10% off if just enter the code VITA10, VITA 10 at checkout, and you can get 10% off of Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix. That's a great way to take your vitamins and minerals. And of course, you can mix anything that you want to with it to adjust it to your taste. Let's go back to Roger Stone. Roger, we were talking just before the break about the special prosecutor law history in this country. It's something we never had before 1978. They allowed it to expire in 1999. So now we don't have a special prosecutor law. Under the law, there were a lot of tactics to keep oversight, to keep this thing from going out of control. They had a 3-judge panel that would appoint the special prosecutor. He had to file regular reports. He had to get permission of the Attorney General if he's going to take the investigation in a different direction, as Mueller has now moved into President Trump's past financial dealings. Ron DeSantis, Congressman, said Mueller's has a very dangerous investigation, and it is, quote, not the way the government is supposed to operate. Your comments?
Yeah, look, we see this graphically in the Paul Manafort case, where they kick in Manafort's door at 5 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. They seize documents that are privileged between he and his lawyer. They basically pat down his wife and him as if they're carrying guns. She's an attorney, by the way. There's multiple violations of his civil liberties. This is going to make their case much tougher in court. They're using terror tactics as if he was some kind of mafia, drug lord.
Compelling his lawyer to testify and saying they're going to do it again?
Complete violation of his civil liberties. Look, I think they have a very weak case against Manafort. Paul Manafort is someone that I've known for over 50 years. He was an usher in my wedding. He was my campaign manager when I ran for Young Republican National Chairman successfully in 1977. He's a brilliant convention politician. And it's pretty clear, I think, to the American people what's afoot here, which is you trump up all these charges against Manafort. Notice they spoke about tax evasion in the indictment, but they don't indict him for tax evasion because they don't have a tax evasion case. Money laundering, the money has to be dirty before you can launder it. Money paid to you by a legitimate political party in Ukraine is not dirty money. That's a perfectly legal transaction. Moving it around Europe, that's not illegal either. Yes, you bring it in the United States, you have to pay taxes on it. That's a tax evasion issue, but they didn't indict him on
Apple does that all the time.
Right.
So all these corporations do. That's why they're saying, hey, let's give them amnesty so they'll repatriate that money. If they earn money abroad, they can leave it abroad and not pay American taxes. And that's a well-known issue. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the case against Manafort is a weak one. But the bottom line of it is, I think we understand the pressure tactic here. It's very simple. Look, Manafort, we're going to put you in jail for 15 or 20 years. All you need to do is admit you were colluding with the Russians and that Donald Trump knew everything. Just say that, and we'll let you off the hook. And I'll tell you something. I've known Manafort 50 years. He's not going to do it. He's not going to bear false witness against the president. He's not going to lie to please silent Bob Mueller. He is not going to make up stories about the president. He is completely supports the president. He's not going to bear false witness. He's not going to perjure himself. He would have to perjure himself. He'd have to make these stories up to please the prosecutors. Not going to happen. Zero chance. Not going to happen.
Yeah, and there's a lot of legal sources who've been looking at this. They've been looking at the search warrant, for example, and saying, look, they got a search warrant for these specific things because, first place, they went to the FISA court rather than going to a real judge, a real court. But you still have to be specific about what you're looking for. And when you take it beyond that, then that taints that search warrant. It taints the data that they get with it. Others have looked at it from the standpoint of New American. They said that this was illegally obtained because they used the basis of the fictitious dirty dossier, or as I call it, the filthy fiction. Yep. They used that as a basis to get this search warrant. So it was based upon a lie. When you have a search warrant that is based upon a lie, the legal doctrine is that it's a poisonous tree, and any fruit of that search warrant then is poisonous fruit. So there's a couple of different ways here that they would rule out all the stuff that they got from him in that over-the-top 5 a.m. raid that they did on him.
Well, not only that, but just the fact that they leaked on Friday that there were indictments to CNN without saying who, that's a violation. And then I read somewhere, Vanity Fair saying, oh, well, that leak didn't come out of Mueller. It almost assuredly came out of Mueller because other than that, it came out of the federal court, which is unlikely that the judge leaked it. So, and it's a terror tactic. It's meant to put pressure on those who are accused for the weekend. Just another example of the abuse of power by Bob Mueller.
There was an interesting editorial. I covered it last week. It was by an individual who had a couple of dealings with Bob Mueller in the past. One of them where Bob Mueller tried to set him up with a guy who came in and said, I know that your client didn't get that money illegally, and I'll be willing to sign a statement to that. And so he has his secretary draw up a statement, and as the guy's about to sign it, he leans forward to him and he goes, I'm just lying because I want to protect my client. And he goes, get out of here. And he says, the guy got up. You could see the wire that was on his back. And he said, and I confronted Bob Mueller with this. And he said, I didn't think that you knew it, but somebody who was a scumbag had told him, look at this guy. And another incident where he came in with the Jeffrey McDonald case, the famous case of the doctor that they said had killed his wife. It became the basis for The Fugitive. Anyway, they tried to come after this guy for a very long time. They had been caught fabricating evidence. And so he came in towards the end of the process, and they had a meeting with Bob Mueller. He said he came in, he sits at the head of the table, and he goes, any comments about the impropriety of the federal government is a non-starter. In other words, you don't dare criticize what the FBI has done or the Department of Justice if they fabricated anything. So that's the kind of guy he said he is. He said he is an inquisitor in the mold of Torquemada.
Yeah, the bottom line of this is really simple. Mueller, Comey, McCabe, Rosenstein, these men have to be disbarred. At the end of this process, they have to be disbarred. They're the ones violating the law. They're the ones cheating. They still don't have a crime that relates to Russia. They're trying to create one. It's time for this entire Russian collusion delusion to be not only exposed but closed down. There was a presidential candidate in bed with Vladimir Putin.
That's
there
right.
was a presidential candidate whose top aides were reaping millions of dollars from the oligarchs around Vladimir Putin. There was a presidential candidate whose aides were hiding the Russian connection, but that candidate is Hillary Clinton. She herself is a cross between Marie Antoinette and Joseph Stalin.
Yeah, and there was an FBI gag order put on the eyewitness that could, the witness that could explain all of this. That's been lifted now by this Department of Justice. What do you know about when this individual may testify and blow the uranium-1 thing out of the water?
I guarantee you that there's some very clutched Democrats today in Washington over that very question. But the sooner Jeff Sessions either decides to do his job or step aside as Attorney General, or maybe move him over to Homeland Security, where perhaps he'd be better suited for the position.
Just not the DEA.
No. I mean, there's so many individuals who could do the job as Attorney General. Rudy Giuliani, Judge Andrew Napolitano, and do it properly. Instead, you have a crippled Attorney General who I have to assume is in some way compromised. I could understand, although I didn't like it, I could understand his recusing himself on Russia. But to recuse himself on uranium-1,
yes.
On what basis? Yes. On what basis?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing to me that we don't have any recusal of Mueller. And again, it is amazing to me that there is not really any process involved of oversight because, again, that law expired in 1999, and they're not even following the template of what that law is. So there is no oversight whatsoever of Mueller. I mean, he has carte blanche to go anywhere he wants to with this investigation, and he is doing that. And as we said, he's the one who needs to be investigated. He's the one who has the true conflict of interest, and it'll be interesting to see what happens now that we know that we have had the gag order taken off of this individual that was put on by Comey's FBI, threatening him during the election, saying that you're going to go to jail or worse. Well, that's it for our program. Thank you for joining us, Roger Stone, and thank you for joining us. And stay tuned. We have Alex Jones coming up.